What do we do when there is a stira between two stam mishnayos? From one mishnah stam mashma, the Rebbe Paskins like one. From the other mishnah stam, it looks like Rebbe Paskins like the other. We're going to deal with all of that on Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph. Then we're going to move on to the other dinim of the mishnah. So the Gemara is going to be quoting many different Amoraim, which will be giving many examples of lechatchila. How should we enunciate the Shema properly? We will move on to the din of the Mishnah of Hakoyda L'Mafreya. And like we said, you're not allowed to read the Mishnah in the opposite order, out of sequence. We will see that the problem with reading something out of sequence isn't exclusively to the Shema. It applies to the Megillah. It applies to the Hallel. We'll see why that applies to the Hallel. And much, much more. Without any further ado, Chevra, again, in our Gemaras, Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis, Mamash at the end of the Amid, okay? Amar Rav Mas. Now, we are going to read this last line according to the emendation of the Shinui Neschos. Should have on your side, let me, it's on the right side, the Shinui Neschos. And we have over here that Tamon Taninon. Over there in Mesechtes Megillah we learned. Over there always means in Bavli. Hakoil Kishedim Likres as Megillah. Everyone is valid. Everyone is qualified to read the Megillah. Chutz, from the classic, these three normally go together. Chedesh, Shoite, and Katan. Now hold on a second, Vlad. If by the way, a chedesh normally means a deaf mute. Obviously, in that Mishnah, when you tell that a deaf mute is not kosher to read the Megillah, we're speaking about someone who can speak. The chedesh over there is a person who's medaber. It means the Snabi can't hear. The fact that the Mishnah says that he is not allowed to read the Megillah, says Rav Masna, that is following the Shita of Rabbi Yosi. In other words, just like Rabbi Yosi in our Mishnah says, that if you don't hear the words of the Shema, you're not Yotzem. That Mishnah, even though the Mishnah doesn't quote Rabbi Yosi, must be following Rabbi Yosi. Because according to the Tanakama, that says that even when you read the Shema and you don't hear, you're Yotzeh, then the Chedesh, which means the guy who speaks but can't hear, who's going to read the Megillah, okay, so he didn't hear. He didn't hear, but everyone else heard. And there's nothing wrong with him not hearing. So that Mishnah must follow, Amarav Masna, the Mishnah in Megillah must follow Rabbi Yosi. Okay. Says the Gemara, now we will learn something from this statement. Now this Rabbi Yosi, just not to get confused. I know we're speaking about the Tana Rabbi Yosi in the Mishnah. This Daf Chavdala Damadal is an Amoira. I'll tell you better. According to the Charedim, it's not even Rabbi Yosi, it's Rabbi Yasa. I'm gonna read it. I'm a Rabbi Yosi, but it's the Amoira. Okay. Rabbi Yosi, Haveinan Sovereign Lameimar. We originally thought, which is what we learned on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis Vlad, when we said that L'Kula Alma Shmoina Esrei, even Rabbi Yosi will hold the Tana Rabbi Yosi that you're good. Rav Masna doesn't agree with it, because if not, he wouldn't have said that the Mishnah in Megillah is following Rabbi Yosi. No, Rabbi Yosi, it should only be by the Shema. So originally we thought that Maplig and Rabbanim Rabbi Yosi, that the argument in our Mishnah, that Rabbanim means the Tanakama, because there's no name, so it's everyone, is only B'Shema. Because since by Shema it says Shema, that's why, what does Shema mean? Either B'chol Lashon, either in any language that you understand, that's the Chacham. And Rabbi Yosi says, no, you have to hear what you're saying. Hoshar kol mitzvahs. But we originally thought, when it comes to your other mitzvahs, even Rabbi Yosi agrees that even if you don't hear it, you're good, right? That's where we left off. A person who read the Shemona saying they didn't hear it, they're good. If that would have been the case, then Rav Masna's statement doesn't work. But now, min the mar Rav Masna, the fact that Rav Masna says that the Mishnah and the Megillah goes according to the Tana Rabbi Yosi, well, that only is a solution if our Rabbi Yosi isn't only about the Shema. Indeed, Havei. So we see from Rav Masna that he understands that the machloekes between our Mishnah Rabbi Yosi and the Rabbanan isn't only regarding the Shema. Shar kol mitzvahs. And by the way, that would also mean regarding Shemona Esrei. But now, first, before we go on, Mele on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis, if the machlokes is only regarding the Shema, like we learned in the Pnei Moshe when we learned the Mishnah, yeah. Why would Rabbi Yossi say Shema is unique? You have to hear even b'diavad because it says Shema. According to that means Shema, you have to hear, but that's only by Shema. If you're telling me, which is clear, that Rav Masna understands that Rabbi Yossi holds that this is not only about the Shema. This is anywhere, everywhere. If you don't hear what you're saying, you're not good. And that's why the Mishnah Megillah will be according to Rabbi Yossi. What will be the source of Rabbi Yossi? Shema is only by Shema. Hashma lo aznucha. So my Tama de Rabbi Yossi, what will be the source? So the Gemara explains. I'll tell you what the source will be. In Parshas B'Shalach, right before Chamishi, right after we read the Shir of Hayam, and then we have the Shir of Miriam, Mamash at the end, the beautiful brachas. So it says that Ve'ha'azan tolim mitzvaysa. Gavalda. Yeah, you have to hear, you have to listen to the mitzvahs, meaning that Rabbi Yossi understands Yishmu aznecha mashu picha medaber. Gavaldik. Okay. Yeah. It's someone who's mentally incompetent. Yeah. Now says the Gemara that don't think that everyone agrees with Rav Masna. No, they don't. So Amar Rav Chizda, I disagree with Rav Masna. So first of all, Rav Chizda says that the girsa in the Mishnah is not okay. The word chedesh is not even written in the Mishnah Megillah. Amar Rav Chizda leis kan goes to Megillah chedesh. In other words, Rav Chizda is saying that if a person is hamadaber the einoi shemeya, he b'diavad can read the Megillah. Why did the Mishnah say the words chedesh shoyte v'katan? So Rav Chizda gives us a very big statement. It's called hashgiras lashon hi masnisa, which means that when there are certain categories that always go together. In halacha, chedesh shoyte v'katan. Whenever you think about, you always put them together. So he says, what happened is that when they wrote the Mishnah Megillah, they were so accustomed to always chedesh shoyte v'katan, they wrote chedesh shoyte. Really? It's only the shoyte and v'katan. A chedesh is allowed to read. Now, why is he saying that? Let's read inside the Charedim. Here we go. Guys, look inside. Amar Rab Chizda. This is like 5 or 6 lines under the Gemara in the Charedim. That leis kan chedesh. Amasnis in the Megillah koi. The Amar the loigers in the Mishnah chedesh. V'toos nafal b'Talmud. Talmud doesn't mean Gemara. Talmud means that when the Chedra were learning, when they wrote the Mishnah, someone made a mistake. The learners made a mistake. The Fisher b'Chala Talmud shoynem yachad chedesh shoyte v'katan. So Tala shoynem lishna is kam chedesh, but it's not correct. Now, why? I want you to know that it's not so quick that people say that a word in the Mishnah is a mistake. It's very rare that they did it. So the Charedim is going to explain. We have to get the underflow of the Gemara. What forced Rab Chizda to say it? Not only because he didn't want to learn like Rav Masna, he didn't want to learn that the machlokes of Rabbi Yossi is b'chala Torah kol. But that's not enough to say that the Mishnah has a word that's a mistake. That's not enough. Why did he do it? This is Gavaldik. Says the Charedim were 9 or 10 lines under the Gemara in the Charedim. In our Mishnah, it says, our Mishnah didn't write a name to the author of the Reisha. We call it a Tanakama. That's a Stam Mishnah. What does it say? That if a person read the Shema, not Rabbi Yossi, thank you. If a person read the Shema, B'diavad, the Mishnah says, Yotza. The Mishnah Megillah doesn't give a name either. Mishnah Megillah says, if the Girsa is correct, that a Chedesh, which means Hamadaber ve'ena Shemeya, that reads the Megillah, B'diavad, not good. So now you have a stira from Stama Astama. Rebbe would not have been soisam like here, like the Chachamim over here, and like Rabbi Yossi over there. That's what's bothering Rab Chizda. And because of that, Rab Chizda says the word Chedesh is not written. This is very important. Okay, now Now, Zok the Gemara again, Omar Rabbi Yosei, this Rabbi Yosei is the Amoira, and here again, the Charedim's Girse is Yesa, Yasa. Omar Rabbi Yasa, the Stabra the Yoid Rabbi Chizda Betrumois. I will tell you that even though Rabbi Chizda was so bothered, not allowing for there to be a stira between a stama and a stama, but now we're going to go the final on this topic. So a Mishnah that we have in Masechtas Trumas, as we'll quote in a moment. And what does the Mishnah say over there? So I'm going to read inside the Chareid. Says the Chareid. The Mishnah begins writing in Trumas that there are categories of people that should not separate Truma. And if they did, even b'di'evid, the Truma is not a Truma. That's the beginning. Okay? And let me tell you who they are. A deaf mute, not the Chedish that we're talking about. We're talking about a real deaf mute. A shoita, a cotton, a person who separated Truma from produce that's not his, and an oived avodah zarah. These are the 5 people the Mishnah says should not separate Truma, and even if they did it, it's not good. Then it says in the Sefer of the Mishnah, other five, that if they separated Truma, b'di'evid, their Truma is a Truma. And then in between, the Mishnah gives this 11th case. And who's the 11th case? Vlad, the person who can speak but cannot hear. The issue with that person, like we spoke on in the intro, is not that he can't separate. He's not a shoit, he can speak. Is that he can't make a bracha, cannot make a bracha. The Mishnah writes that if he separated, this truma is a truma. Now, let me ask you a question. According to the Chachamim, a person b'di'evet who says the Shmas Yoitz, which means b'di'evet, this person's bracha is a bracha. If this person's bracha is a bracha, there isn't even a need for the Mishnah to say that b'di'evet is truma is a truma. Why would you think otherwise? It must be that the reason why Rabbeinu HaKadosh needed to write that this guy who can speak but cannot hear, b'di'evet is truma is because that Mishnah is also following Rabbi Yossi. Problem is, it's Tamak Rabbi Yossi, which means his bracha is not a bracha. Now you have a chiddush. Even though the bracha is not a bracha, b'di'evet, the separation is good. The bracha is not good. Okay, it's like a person who separated without making a bracha. B'di'evet, the truma is a truma. In other words, let's read it inside. That Omar Rabbi Yasa, that the Mishnah and Truma is, Rabbi Chizda will be moide that it follows Rabbi Yossi, right? And indeed, not only will Rabbi Chizda hold so, but we heard beferish that Rabbi Chanina said in the name of Rabbi Chizda it's Rabbi Yossi. But now we have to resolve something. Now that we explained that the reason why Rabbi Chizda amended the Mishnah and the Megillah, he took out the words Chedesh, is for there not to be a stira between stam and stam. Well, now you're going to have the same problem, stam and stam. In our Mishnah, right in bracha, stama, not like Rabbi Yossi. You're telling me that there's a stam Mishnah in Truma. The fact that it needed to say that a medaber ve'ena shemeya b'di'evet that separated truma, that chiddush is only needed with Rabbi Yossi. It follows Rabbi Yossi. Not only does it make sense, but Rabbi Chizda said so. But now, how do you resolve the stama? You got to gavaldik, and the Gemara is going to have 2 answers. This is piece of Gemara. So Amar Rabbi Yossi berebi bun that al karchach itmar hi de Rabbi Yossi. Let me say it like this: that Mishnah, I'll tell you why it must be Rabbi Yossi, not the Chacham. Not only because of the logic that we said before. The logic we said before was that according to the Chachamim, it's not even a chiddush, because since b'di'evet the bracha is a bracha, if the bracha is a bracha, for sure the truma is a truma. He says like this. Like we mentioned before, the Mishnah began 5 that should not separate, and if they separated, the separation, even b'di'evet, is not good. Then the Mishnah spoke about another 5 that should not separate, but if they separated, b'di'evet, it is good. This medaber ve'eno shemeya is an 11th. Problem is, why wasn't he bunched either in the first 5 or in the second 5, 6 and 5? Why is he in a whole separate category? The Tanina, we learned that the Chamishtach Kadmaisa, in the first 5, where the Mishnah says again, don't separate it, and even if you did it, b'di'evet, it's not good. He was not learned with them. I mishum she'ein trumasa truma. Don't tell me that why was he not included in the list? So you're going to answer, of course not. What will be the answer? Because his truma is valid, like which, by the way, which it is. But if that's the case, if his truma is valid, then he should have been learned in the next 5. And he's also not learned with them. So the kasha is, why is the medaber the eno shemeya? If even b'diavad it's not good, he should have been written in the Reish. He's not written in the Reish. He should have been written in the Sefer. He was not in there, which is Gavaldi. And therefore, turning to Daf Chav Daled Amud Beis, have a Soifach Meimer that Rabbi Yossi. I'll tell you why Rabbi didn't do it. Because this 6th is really not needed l'chacham. This medaber ve'enu shemeya is like a tangent. It's like a parenthesis. Why is it a parenthesis? Because it's only needed with Rabbi Yossi. L'chachamim, we don't even have to speak about him. Avada his truma is a truma. Chiddush is, even according to Rabbi Yossi, which taka his bracha won't be a bracha, his truma is a truma. Why does the Gemara mean to say? But it explains the charedim. When do you have a kasha stama astama? These are big klalim. Only if a Mishnah writes a rule explicitly. Like over here, the Mishnah writes without giving a name, that if you read the Shema and you didn't hear Yatsa, the Rebbe didn't write who says it, because the Rebbe was trying to tell you, I'm not going to tell you who said it, because that's the halach. Writing it's tam. When you write a din explicitly, if that's the din, Rebbe didn't say in the Mishnah over there in Trumois that if he made the bracha and he didn't hear he's Yoitza. Rebbe didn't say those words. The kasha is that there was an implication. Why was it even needed to be mentioned? Is arayah because we follow Rabbi Yossi. Any inference from a stama is not a problem if it's contradiction stama. And adarab, fakir, that's the whole point. The emes, there was no need. Rebbe Paskin's not like Rabbi Yossi. However, since there is a Rabbi Yossi, Rebbe B'derech Hagav wants to let you know that even according to Rabbi Yossi, by trumas, b'diavad trumas a truma. And to make it clear that we don't paskin like him, he did not include it in the latter 5. It's not 5 and 6, 5 and 5. And this is a separate standing. Why standing alone? Because it's only following Rabbi Yossi. Givaldi. Look inside the Charegim, 6 lines from the top. Okay. So there's 2 answers. I'm sorry. The Gemara is giving 2 answers. Answer number 1 is you don't ask stama from an inference. That's like we said. Answer number 2, that the fact that Rebbe wrote it in a category for itself, adarabah, that's showing you that Rebbe holds we don't paskin like it. The adarabah. No, answer number 1 is shuki. Stama astama is only a contradiction if it's an explicit stama against an explicit stama. Since the stama of trumas is only by a yitur, by implication, that's not a kasha. Rebbe, by implication, can be merabas. Number 2, the very fact that Rebbe put it in a separate category, not in the sefer, that in itself is Rebbe telling you, I don't accept this opinion. If Rebbe would have passed like Rabbi Yossi, it would have been 5 and 6, not 5, 5 and 1. Give up. Okay. So we are on Daf Chav Daled Amud Beis. We are on the top line from the Amid. In the Mishnah, which we call Halacha Daled, we had the 4 dinim. We went through the first din of you read, you didn't hear. We quoted today out of Masna, which is important, what we added for people who just came, that even though on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara was limiting that machlokes only to Shema Yisrael. Today we learned in Amoida that holds that this machlokes goes everywhere, and Adarabah, Taka goes everywhere, and therefore by Trumas, just for an example, Rabbi Yossi also would hold that if you make a bracha and you can hear, you're not yoitze, and a chanami. And then with the nuance, and nevertheless, your truma is a truma. Okay. We don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi. That we already began the Gemara. We don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi. Paskin like the stama over here. Okay. Now, the next case of the Mishnah was that karav like dig ba'oisi yoisel. So here again, we had machloikes tanoim b'diyevet. Everyone holds that you should lechatchila try to enunciate all the words correctly. According to our version, Rabbi Yossi says yatsa. This Rabbi Yossi is the lenient, and Rabbi Yehuda says lo yotza. Rabbi Yehuda says lo yotza. So says the Gemara, Elu tzarech digduk. Let me tell you which parts of the Shema should chap our attention to enunciate it correctly. Al levavecha, like we spoke out, because since the last al ends with a lamed, the next word levavchem or levavecha begins with a lamed. So if a person won't make a point to stop, they'll say al levavecha. The same lamed will be here, the same lamed will be there, even though b'diavad you'll be yotzeh, but the al stop al levavchem. Now Esav b'sotcha is a little bit difficult. Like I spoke out in the Mishnah, because Vez and Beis, even Ashkenazim, even those of us who lost a lot of the Masaidas, Beis and Beis are not the same. Same thing with Akon of Psil. So I never understood that correctly. Some people suggest, here in Mekanaraya, all the Sfardim, that they always pronounce a Beis. Some people today, they don't say a Ve. Even when it's written without a Dagush, they say Be. But it wouldn't fit Akon of Psil. Everyone makes a P and a F. P and a F, everyone separates. Anyways, Esav b'sotcha. Vavada tema mehira is easy because mem. Yeah, that's what Akon of Psil. Akon of Psil. Okay. Eschem meyeretz. So in other words, wherever the letter of one word ends, which is the same letter of the following word, you got to make a pause. And if not, machlokes tanoim, whether you yoitz. Rab Chanina b'shem Rab Acha, he says, Asher nishba. Asher nishba Hashem. Now, what's the Asher? People are thinking, what are you talking about? So says the Chareidim, 12 lines from the top, since we don't read God's name, whenever it says Yud Kei Vav Kei, Havai is read, Shem Adnai. Adnai begins with the letter Aleph, Nishba. Now here you see clearly that Rab Chanina was an Ashkenazi, because Sfardim don't confuse an ayin and an aleph. It's like two different worlds. But for people like us, ayin aleph. Ayin aleph. My father told me that when he came to Brazil, there was a big Baal Bigduk that moved to Rio, wherever he lived in. And he was in a Goyish school, so my Zayda hired him. My father should have. So and my Zayda was then very, he couldn't afford it. Like a cost of fortune. So you pay for 45 minutes, you pay $100. Today you go to a therapist, you pay $800 for 40 minutes. What did you need? What's the Leden? So he says, Aleph and Ayin. He says, for this I paid money. Aleph is and Ayin is eh. And he took him out of the class. He was very frustrated. But no, there's Aleph and there's Ayin. So Ayin, the Ayin from Nishba, and the Adnai, the Aleph, can be confused. You got to also take a break. Rab Shmuel Bar Chanina b'shem Rab Oishia. Now he writes a whole different thing. Now it's interesting. That he's writing that when you say the first bracha of the morning, you have to say Yoitzer Oir Uvoirei Choshech. Now, what are you talking about? Where are the words that could be confused together? Yoitzer Oir. So he was not, this is not like the other cases before. What Shmuel Bar Chanina b'shem Rabbi Oisha is saying is that the lo yemar, a person should not erroneously think that what you should say is yoitzer oir uvoirei noiga, that God forms the light and creates twilight. Why would anyone want to say noiga? So the Chareidim says beautiful. There's a pasuk in Yeshaya. This is in Yeshaya it says Yoitzer Oir Uvoire Choshech Oise Shalom Uvoire. Who knows the end? In Yeshaya it says Ra. And when we quote this pasuk in davening, instead of saying that God is Boide Ra, we see it Boide Sakoil. So you would think that just like we accept it, that at the seif of the pasuk, when we quote it in davening, we don't quote it verbatim. We change that on to hakoil. So you would also think darkness. Darkness, why don't we say that? We understand why God created Ra. It brings up all these theological questions. So we resolve it by speaking in a different way. So we can think the word noiga, twilight, doesn't sound as dark as dark. So let's take the roughness off the edges. So don't say uvoida noiga. Don't do that. Dafke say uvoida choshech. Why? So this is something that we had on Talmud Bavli, because one of the deities that you think was only in the old days, it's really today, they just have different words of it, is that there's a power of light and there's a power of darkness. There's the God of light and the God of dark. They're so opposites, they can't be the same God. It's two different gods. And we're building up to come to say Shema Hashem Echad. So we want to point out that they all come from the same source. So on one hand, at the end of the pasuk, okay, there's a place for that. But in the beginning, we have to make it clear that there's light, there's day, and there's night, there's good, and there's evil. And we believe that it all comes not in the way, so it has to do with, you got to spend an hour explaining how that all works. But there's only one source for everything, and that's how we should begin. So what is amazing is that behemshech to enunciating the words properly, we're putting in over here a whole different thing, which is it's not a whole different thing. That proper enunciation is very much connected to the understanding of the words, to the kavanah. Be careful how you speak. Be mindful to the words that you say. Maybe when people pause and they speak slower, they start thinking that they should choose better words. Maybe it comes together. So he says, don't change anything. Leave. Says the Gemara, Rab Chagai, B'Shem Rab Abba Bar Zavda, says that what? That Sham Sharulach. That in davening, we should also say Sham Sharulach and not Sham Hidululach. Now, people that daven 3 times a day are reading this Gemara and saying, what are you talking about? I don't remember any such words in davening. No, you don't. But if you do remember, what we learned before is the following. There was a machlokes whether you say the entire Vayomer at night when you say the Shema, how they do it in Bavel, how they do it in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalmi. And we learned that in Eretz Yisrael, even though they would read the third parsha, but they would read it in an abbreviated way. Remember that? And in Bavel, in other words, they wouldn't mention tzitzis. And in Bavel, if they would begin Vayomer, they would read the whole Vayomer. But in Bavel, they skipped it at night. But the Gemara asked, the Mishnah says that Maskidin Yitzias Mitzrayim Baleilois. How was there a time that even when they read the Shema at night, skipped the whole? What did they do with Shema? So Mela in Yerushalayim, they would read the Ani Hashem Lekechem Asher Etzei Siyascha. So for that, the Gemara says is that they added a whole moedim. And I'm reading inside the Charedim, he reminds us that the Gemara says they used to say moedim anachnu locha, and they didn't even say emes v'emuna. If you didn't have Ani Hashem Lekechem, they didn't say the word emes. But what would they say before Micha Moicha? They would say moedim anachnu locha, shohoiseisanum eretz Mitzrayim, etc. The Shornu Lacha, and we sang to you, Micha Moicha Ba'elam Hashem. Now there's Shira and there's Hilul, 2 completely different things. So he says that the words V'Shornu Lacha or V'Sharu Lach is Dafke, and don't change it to Hilul Lach. Let me say it like this, in the words of the Alter Rebbe, there's a whole mimer about Hallel. Hallel is our capacity either to see the goodness of God and to praise him post facto, or even better, Hallel is when a Jew says Hallel, but Hallel Neiroi, your light is shining. It can be a light that doesn't shine. Shining means that I am able to see the goodness of God. So if we want for a miracle to happen, even prior to it happening, there's a concept of saying Hilul. So just to know, the word Hallel has to do with the goodness that is something that we can perceive to be as goodness. And the shir, there are many times when something happens and you don't have how to explain it, how to understand it. What you do is you sing. It can be a happy song, it can be a sad song. So just to know that he wants to emphasize that whatever happened over there was such great giluyim, some of it we couldn't even chap. And that's why the Chazal instituted dafka, the word shira, and not the word chilul. Okay. So we had 2 statements that really had less to do with enunciation, even though somehow it's connected. It had more to do with content. But now, going on, Rab Levi says, in the name of Rav Avdima, from where? From Haifa. In the name of Rab Levi Bar Sisi, that the tzarech la hatiz, you have to stress the zayin of tizkiru, as we spoke out when we learned the Mishnah, because the alternative would be a sin and a zayin in that context can be interchanged easily without making an effort. And schar is dafka what we're not saying. We're not saying that we're doing this to get reward. And even if a person is serving God, they're not going to boast about it. I'm doing it. No. In order for us to remember. Similarly, Rabbi Yoina b'Shem Rab Chizda, now we're moving away from the Shema, says, we say, Hallel HaGadol, which is Kapitel Kuf Lamed Vav, which is what we say every Shabbos, for example, before Baruch Shamar. Also, Tzarech Lahatis, you have to stress the Samach of Chazudoi. Because if you're not going to stress the Samach, you can interchange it with the Shin. Kilo Oilam Chazde means that God forever is suspicious of us. Which is a very sad statement to me. Okay. So that's other areas in davening is trying to say where if you notice that the way you say it without making a special focus, you might interchange a little bit of one sound with the other and it's going to change the meaning. Make sure you don't change the meaning. Because we're supposed to go to Cheder and have a teacher that teaches us. And that's the Cheder over here. And once again, Tilas Hashem, you have a line, or you have a line between the Alul and Bavech. Wherever you have, there's a line. But he's saying there's nothing in our Siddur in Tilas Hashem for this. It's very irritating when you hear people in Shul. Laman, Tizkiru. Okay. Let's go right. All right. Says the Gemara, Tana, we learned in Abraisa, Ein Mavirin Lifnei HaTeva, that don't allow for the Baal Tefillah to be. The Teva was the ark in front of which the Baal Tefillah would daven, the Chazan would daven. Not someone from Haifa, you Haifaniks, loy Haifanim. Wow, it's like, so this is, and not, it was a Beishan. No one from Beishanim, you shameful ones. V'loy Tivainim, no one from Tivaim. Why? Because all of the three cities, they would confuse the Hey and the Ches. Like the Russians. Hello. There you go. Mamish. And also like us Ashkenazim, an ayin and an aleph. But the Gemara is saying that whether it's the Gemara or whether this is the Brisa still, there's nothing inherently wrong with the Haifa. Be'etzem. In other words, if you have a guy from Haifa that was educated to read properly, he can daven. He said, if he knows how to pronounce things, then mutter. Beautiful. And what's the chiddush? So he writes, the Charedim writes for the bottom. You might have thought that you should never take anyone from Haifa. Because even if this guy knows how to read properly, what happens if this guy is hoarse? Then you're going to ask the other guy from Haifa. You would have thought, loy plug. Chiddush, for this, we can be, we're not that chai with this, we're very liberal, we're very tolerant. Okay, we understand nuance. Piskam, moving on. The next section in the Mishnah, the third din in the Mishnah was Hakoyda Lemafreya. And by the way, just to repeat, if one were to read the Parshiyos out of order by the Shema B'di'evet, he would be Yoitze, because in the Torah the Parshiyos are not written together. When the Mishnah writes, and there's no machlokes that if you read the Shema backwards, Hakoyda Lemafreya, you're not Yoitze. The Mishnah is saying either if you read the Psukim backwards, or if you read the words backwards. It's in one parsha itself. Don't go out of the order, not with the words and not with the psuk. The Baal Shem Tov says that Hakoyda Lemafreya means that whenever you read any part of the Torah, and you think that whatever you're reading about is only of the past, if you don't understand that it's about right now, you're not yoitz. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yoina Omar. That Tana Rav Nachman bar Ada. Everything is written in a different way. I'm still not used to. That Rav Nachman bar Ada taught the following Brais. That what? That in the Brais it says the Tana Rabbi Yosi Yoimer. No, I'm sorry. While the Amoyre Rabbi Yosi says no, that the Brais was not taught by Rav Nachman bar Ada. It was taught by Nachman Sava, by the Shpola Zayda, by Nachman Sava. As was. That v'hoyu, what's the source? What's the source? That if you read the Shema Lemafreya, you're not yoitze because of the words v'hoyu. V'hoyu hadvarim ha'ela, these words. And they shall be, meaning kederech havayosen yihu, that they have to be the way they are written in the Torah, not out of sequence. Now, and that says the Braisa, af b'halal u b'kriya Shema, Cain, it's not only for Shema. You read it out of order, even with the Evid, you're not Yoitz.
Not clear Shema. It says clear from Megillah.
I'm sorry. What did I say? I'm sorry.
You said clear Shema.
Okay, so now the Gemara is asking, Mela, Nicham, like Bishleima, Bikriyas HaMegillah. There's also a source. In the Megillah it says, Kichsavam. I want to just add something that logically, the sequence is essential. Because really, there was no revealed miracle. There was the greatest miracle, Malubish B'Teva, but things happened the way they needed to happen. If you're going to read it out of sequence, you're not going to get the story. But that's not good enough. Logic is not good enough. Better is the source. The source is, it says, Kichsava. Chilushoinim Kichsava. But however, Behalela, in other words, what's the source that by Hallel, if you read it out of sequence, even b'di'evet, you're not yoitze. So now I want you to know that there's so many different ways of learning this Gemara, and we're going to follow the Mahara Fulda. Because I looked at him yesterday. So the Gemara's answer is, I'll tell you the source. Since it says, Mizrach Shemesh Ad Mavayimol Shem Hashem, from the rising of the sun until the setting, Hashem's name is praised. Guys, put your finger in the Mahara Fulda, that Geshem Shezri Chasa V'Shkia Lo Yahafchu, just like the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun cannot be inverted, goes up in the east, goes down in the west. Hachinami Muhulel Shem Hashem, when you are doing Hallel to the name of God, which is the Hallel in Tehillim, Lo Yishapech, don't change the order. Asks the Gemara, Mo'at Shemamino, what's the kasha? Let's read inside the Mahara Fulda. Dilma, who told you that? Maybe the pasuk is telling you that from sunrise until sunset we praise God. From the morning until prayer doesn't mean that you can't change the order. What's the raya from the Mizrach Shem Shemavoy? So answers the Gemara. Daf Chafei Amar Rab Avun. Going to follow the whole Gemara in the Mahara Fulda. That oid he amura al seder, meaning it says the Mahara Fulda. You're right. I retracted my raya. I'll give you another reason. You had a kasha in my first reason. Let me give you a new reason. Says the Mahara Fulda, Shekol Halal Mesudar ala Seder L'fi Azmanim. Since Halal was written on its chronological order, so how can you go out of the chronological order? And by the way, this I'm going back to what I said about Megillah. That's a logic for the Megillah. It happened in that chronological order. What do we mean that it was written for its chronological order? So you should know that Hallel wasn't only said about the miracles of the past, but it was said about the past and said about the future, and the right order, from the past to the future, which is B'tzeis Yisrael Mitzrayim. That's l'shava. That's clear. We don't have to explain it. When it says Leilanu Hashem Leilanu, that is a whole capital for Golus, which also makes sense because we're saying, why would the Goyim say, "Where's our God"? When could the Goyim even have a possibility to question that? During Golus. Right. Did I skip something? Leilanu Hashem Leilanu. Very good. For Golus. There's something for Golus. When will we see that God hears our voice? By Yemais HaMashiach. And Isru Chag Ba'avoisim is referring to the miracles that are going to happen. Where do we see that? Where do we see that's Goygo Magoy? Because not only will there be miracles, but God is going to double his miracles by that war. Hold on. And then when it says Eli or Keli Ata V'yoy Daka, that already refers to Asad Lavi here means by Tchias HaMesim. In other words, since the Seder of Halal was written on a chronological order, that's why it makes sense that you can't go backwards on the Chayda. That's a svara for the Megillah as well. God willing, to be continued. Oh, for sure. For sure. Maybe this is the word. Doesn't say Mashiach comes, it says Yemais HaMashiach.